Hey everybody, appreciate you watching this video. On this one, we're going to be talking about hunting deer in the hills. Every year, we take a trip and meet up with a bunch of buddies from kind of all over the country, and we do deer drives in the hills with muzzleloaders. I've talked a lot about how it's my favorite trip of the season. It's just really fun to get a group together like that and learn as much as we possibly can by covering a bunch of ground and trying a unique tactic like deer driving in the hills. At the end of last season, a group of us recorded a podcast talking about all the things that we've learned over the years doing these drives. Even if you're not somebody that's hunting as a group, I think that the things that we've learned by hunting in this group can help you as a solo hunter as well if you're hunting similar types of habitat and terrain. You maybe have listened to this podcast on the audio platforms, but we did a condensed version of it that we've been saving for the last year that has more cutaways and more examples of what we're talking about and just is a little bit more focused on the strategy that we use when we're out there. Obviously, the majority of our content on this channel has been long form content, but we're just trying to mix it up and do something a little bit different. So if you guys like this shorter, more condensed version of a podcast, leave a comment and we'll try to do more of that in the future. Also, if there's something that you've learned by hunting in the hills or hunting with a group like what we do, leave a comment and tell us what maybe we're missing. Maybe it'll help us in the future as well. Thanks for watching. Let's get to it. It's certainly far from easy because that first 2 years, I mean, we just got stomped. Like, actually, after year 2, I remember being like, dude, I don't know, like, when we're going to figure this out. Because I remember going into year 2 being like, oh, no doubt, man, we got him this year. And we didn't, and that was like scary. Close calls that year. Close calls both those first 2 years, but hadn't quite, put the pieces of the puzzle together and still mess them up mostly, I think that's the funny thing is you still mess them up.
Yeah. And one of the common misconceptions that like deer drives is just a bunch of people walking around the woods and just hoping to get deer up on their feet. But like the amount of planning that we put into these hunts that we did this year, like we were up till 1 a.m. sometimes just planning hunts, and like in between drives we're talking about it, and like everything's really thought out and like specific. So like, yes, you can have success in just going out walking around trying to push deer to people, but especially in like hill country like this, there's a lot of specific strategies that have gone into it. And over the years, I've found common themes that we kind of can apply to different areas. So a lot of the time is really spent on strategizing instead of doing the actual drive.
Yeah, I mean, the drives last about, I don't know, once they start, it's 90% setup.
Yeah. Yeah, we give ourselves on average an hour to an hour and a half to set one up as far as like getting into position, whether that means hiking or driving to different pull-offs, whatever. Generally, those logistics look like an hour and a half. Because I would say we take the time that it is, add an hour or an hour and a half, and then add 10 minutes to that, depending on how big a scale it is.
Yeah, and that's after at least 30 minutes of putting it together, making sure everybody knows exactly what they're supposed to do.
And where everybody else is in relation to them.
Yeah, everybody's got to know where they have to be and where everybody surrounding them the whole drive is going to be. Like, you have to communicate the entire plan to 15 people.
Ben and Zach basically go around the whole circle. And Keith just like, this is what you're doing, this is what you're doing, this is what you're doing.
And then being super sneaky about it too, like for how loud it can be in those woods, like, and not bumping that buck out of the bed until when you want to bump it, compared to like
it's cool.
The little bit of drives I've done back home where it's just like those guys go over there and they go over there and they walk that way. Like, you're not worried about being quiet or sneaky at all. You're just like, we're pushing this woodlot out.
Weber said it best. Tactical insertion. It's like everybody's adaptive. So Mitch and I were in a spot where like we were standard sort of, but we were also like containment to the point that if we needed to run over and bump something down, it would take 2 seconds. And
I like that move.
Everybody knows the intention where you're trying to make them dump down to.
I like that move because it's also really explaining how it's a team game when, if you're just hunting a buck for yourself, you probably wouldn't run to force him a different direction. But it's like when you're just trying to get him back into the circle, you're just trying to, we use the term like ping pong or just kind of double bump, triple bump, however many times we made bump that deer. And a lot of times you come back and everybody's got a different story. Like, yeah, I looked up and I saw Ben running and then here, then he came right down, or, like I remember the first year, like Brad
Brad popped over the top and he hit the turkey call and just cut real fast, and it was just like, they're coming, you know.
Bunch of deer, bunch of deer, bunch of deer.
The other thing too that I was going to add to making the plan is what I really like is that everybody will throw in like, you know, I've been noticing this, and then you just take that and you just run with it. Like over the years, there's been a whole bunch of little things that you say that when you say them, it's like, I know how to, like, feel like I know how to like explain that a little bit better. One that comes to mind, and one of my big takeaways, is you were talking about how your dad was walking with his buddy, and they do 5 minutes. One guy walks and 5, or you know, whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. And I think that just doing that as like a driver is really important, and kind of like what happened when you killed the one today, which we'll talk about that story in general. But I had just got to these guys, and instead of going past them, they just moved up, and we were kind of leapfrog or like stagger step into this spot, but just moving together. And you're kind of doing that with all the guys moving into position if you can. And I mean, even on the second to last one we did today, while nothing produced from it, I really liked that move where we had talked about, you know, 5-minute time difference. Ben was going to go up and over and kind of get to his final position. He was going to wait ready to shoot in case Ben bumped something. I was going to make a different move on the other side of him, and it's that deal where one guy goes, one guy watches. If you're using your instinct, you're doing that already, but to actually put like a little bit of numbers on it with time and stuff like that, I think helps explain that.
That's a question I had for you. How do you think the timing of this year's drives
unbelievable
compared to last
in general?
Years?
Like
100,000%.
I mean, pretty much 10 out of 10 compared to what we've done. Now, in the past, we've had some really good ones, but dude, I mean, this year was kind of sweet how everyone, right when you would expect to see somebody, it was just like, boom, there they are. Yeah. That's sweet.
Yeah.
The cool part about it, though, was you expect to see somebody there, but they nail it, and there's somebody there, and there, and you see all of them at the same exact time. Mm-hmm. I don't even, out of the 4 days, I don't know if there was one that like anybody was actually late or anybody actually missed. Like we kind of nailed it.
I don't know that anybody was ever in a stupid position either that I like really saw.
That's part of it. Is like
me and Jake the one day when we made stuff happen.
Yeah, but you guys got it going. That was really the only missed route, but
we had to.
The timing made it work.
Yeah, and like I feel like part of that's everybody's taking like escape routes into their spots, or like areas where they could get bumped long range from somebody else.
I think one thing that I learned also is that as much as possible, my favorite thing is when guys don't have to walk in on a train, like in a train, you know, like it's kind of convenient if you're trying to set things up quickly, like just get guys down and around or up and around. But man, on those ones where you can just collapse in and like especially hit from, you know, different drop points or whatever, like people can park on different parking spots and you kind of fan it wide, and then you just break it all down to where we're all essentially standing on the same point or in the same hub down at the bottom where ridges come together or whatever. But you take this big wide net and then you just cinch it down. I think that honestly, ideally, you can come in from different angles or even just go up different drainages if you're making the hiking move in instead of parking. But just coming in from those as many angles as possible is what I'm kind of trying to get across. That's my favorite. Not to say that you're going to eliminate the train walking, you know, where it's just like drop off, drop off, drop off. You're not going to eliminate that completely, more than likely, but you're really bumping your odds up when you're constantly just closing. I think the best example of it personally was Keith and near miss. And while we didn't get anything, that was like bump, and then he just ended up like nice buck multiple bucks just were going right through everybody. Somehow we didn't get him somehow, but
I would say again, just using the terrain, like we were talking earlier about just how the terrain affects your ability to hear certain things. that's the same for the deer too. So use that to your advantage on your way into certain places. Even just setting up the drives, just use that terrain to basically block the deer from hearing you get to the place that you're trying to go.
That's actually something that I was thinking about this season is, I often use the reference of, the flatland guys, like the Wisconsin guys, it took a little bit to realize, the difference between driving a cattail marsh, something super thick, and hilly terrain that's open. But I was thinking about it, I was like, man, even though New York, at least a lot of the places that I've been, which are kind of in your guys' areas, while they're hilly, they're a totally different type of hill. They're way broader and they're not super tight together to where you have these ridges that are almost touching that are on other sides of the valley, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and like the ridges here are it's like a knife edge. Like it just, you go up, you hit the top of it, and you can see down both sides. And it, like back in New York, it's a 2 mile wide hill,
which is cool. I think that terrain is part of the reason that we're so efficient. The whole thing, it helps a lot.
Well, it helps. It helps, and it definitely too.
It helps when it
well,
helps,
yeah. It's like I think that was the learning curve. Honestly, it's like that's been the learning curve. Is there's more to the hill than what you think, which is what Ted and I talked about. Which surprising, man. When we were previously always trying to drive them all the way to the bottom. We're like, okay, here's this bedding area. So, we've got this pin where we generally think he's going to bed. And then to drive him to the bottom, let's just say, for example, to drive to the bottom and then back up the other side to actually get terrain between him and where he was bumped from. He'd have to go, at times we were looking at, it's like 600 yards, 800 yards of just wide open running down the pipe. Like, is he going to really do that? And then we started asking ourselves that, and it's like, no. Like, he's not going to do that. He's going to wrap back, or he's going to, continue to just put these little folds between him and the danger. So we kind of shifted the drive to that this year a little bit more. The shape of the move looked slightly different in a lot of these. And a lot of times, too, which is something that we talked about and has been on my mind since the Indiana trip, like this stupid, and I'm ready. Feel like I'm officially ready to kind of wrap a bow on it, at least for the season. Is the side hill thing, man? The one you shot today is exactly the side hill. The side hill theory, if you will, and it's like if you can be wrapping in that side hill, like you said, with the terrain, you're just using your terrain on the same hill as them to just sneak in tight to them. And as we're driving, you've got your guys that are obviously just blatantly bumping them, that are like getting skylined on top or coming up and over. But if you've got these guys coming in also collapsing down on it from the side, when that guy that, is, you're pretty much having that guy let them see him. When that happens, a lot of times those side hill guys are just either double bumping and then they go to the bottom finally, or they just get the shot. And man, I like doing that because I just like that because it felt like that's something that we've dabbled with in past years, but we nailed this year. Like
Shane's buck too is similar to side hill, but he was using the secondary drainages. There's main drainage and then there's some secondary finger ridges that came out. He was using those secondary drainages to get more terrain. Like he can go over multiple different little fingers and get different levels of terrain between him and danger. So realizing they're at least mature bucks most of the time are not going to go to that primary drainage. They're going to go over through those secondary drainages to get multiple levels of terrain between them and danger.
An absurd amount of fun. Right?
It really isn't, because it's like you got to sit here and wait an entire year to do it again, and that's always the worst. But it's crazy. Fourth year in the books now doing this. Yes, senior year. It's been a lot of fun, and
that's why he called it senior year earlier.
I have this tendency to look at things like, especially hunting wise, like when you start doing a new strategy or hunting a new species or something, like, it's kind of like your first year, you're just getting your feet wet. You're like that freshman, you don't really know what's going on. You know the sport, but you don't really know what's going on specifically. And then by the 4th year, you start to get that, like, I've got experience. I've got a little more control of the situation. And I feel like that's where we're at.
Yeah, kind of makes sense. I always thought I'd be like a 6th year senior.
Well, does anybody have anything to add on the final thoughts of the Muzz season? Thank you, boys. Thanks to everybody watching the videos, listening to the podcast, because it makes it a lot easier for us to come do it. Thanks to everybody that was a part of it. Thanks to everybody that filmed and volunteered their time to film, because that's very awesome as well. So awesome time, boys. Till next year, Muzz Camp out.